Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the night 3 of the Ojai Festival. Welcome back. We've had an astonishing series of concerts this afternoon, which we would love to talk about, and I have a feeling Susan McClary, immediately on my left, will unfold herself about maybe one or two of those topics. To my immediate right, Tania León is with us in the house today. We will hear her new piece for Yola, the Youth Orchestra of Los Angeles, tomorrow morning when we hear Tania's piece and the premiere of pieces by a series of brilliant high school students from Los Angeles, including the incredible Sharon Hurwitz. So that is going to be a highlight of our entire festival. We will talk about that in 1 minute. I simply need to say one gigantic corrective and apologize to everyone for last night speaking about Los Jornaleros del Norte, which will be the first band you will hear at Santa Paula tomorrow starting at 5 o'clock. Just to say, of course, my Spanish is so appalling. Jornaleros does not mean journalists. Thank you. Nice try. As a very lovely patron gently reminded me, Jornaleros is a reference to the pay rate of a day laborer. And it's what you get paid to working a day if you're standing in front of a construction company and are just hired for the day. And the group was made up from day laborers and are singing about that life in the north, Los Jornaleros del Norte. So we will hear from them tomorrow. They do, nonetheless, journalistic work in the great Mexican tradition of the corrido, which is music made where you take something that would not otherwise make it into history, and the act of making a song about it creates not only the history, but even more important, the legend. That is the creative work going on right now in workers and laborers communities across Los Angeles and across the country. Now, let's talk about tomorrow morning, talk about your day today. You've spent all day rehearsing. Would you please tell us, Tania, what's been happening?
Well, the piece that I have written is called Palante. Palante is a contraction of two words. Para adelante means moving forward, going forward. And I was invited to write this piece by Maestro Dudamel for the Youth Orchestra of Los Angeles. It had been an experience that I cannot even begin to tell you what it had been. The leader, the conductor of the orchestra, when we spoke, she said, could you write a piece that would have Latin American overtones? Because some of the members of the orchestra come from Latin America, and I think that that would be very interesting to experience. I started thinking about what to do, because in Latin America, one of the things that happens is that rhythm becomes very complex. And it becomes polyrhythmia, you see? And how to do this with youngsters in such a way that they could master it, and yet it would be not as difficult as it may sound. Well, to my surprise, all of the teachers said that the push had been incredible. They are very involved with the whole thing. And I hope that tomorrow you will hear the overtones of the cultures of the Americas in that piece. Besides that, the piece is in 3 movements. The first movement it's very palante, you see? The second movement has the marriage of genres of the United States with genres of what had happened with that pollination, you see, that syncretism. So the soloists of ice, which actually are members of this piece, because the piece is for 4 soloists of ice, flute, bassoon, alto, saxophone, and trombone. Those soloists are going to be doing jazz. You see, this is how the second movement begins, with the soloist doing a jazz conversation. And it gets interrupted by ragtime. And the thing is that if you see these kids playing that ragtime, it's to die for. I'm still alive, but believe me. It is just tremendous. Then it gets again interrupted by the jazz, a little bit much more fiery. You know, I mean, it's like the players really got into, you know, and you will see these players, they really get down, you see? And then back to the ragtime. And then it finishes with a solo on the flute. But please, watch the kids. Because something happens to them, you know, I mean, they really get into and they start moving, and it is something else. And then third movement is called enclave. Because, for example, you are probably very familiar with this. Right? You hear that and you remember Babalu, you know? Right? Cuban, right? So what happened is that an extraction of that clave is actually a reminiscence or something that came from Africa into the Caribbean and all the Americas. And that is another clave that came from the Ghanaian people and the Nigerians. You see? So in other words, one is inside the other. So that's why it's called enclave, because you're going to hear these kids doing that clave, and it's really a let go. And if you feel like moving in your chair, it's okay. You see? So it's enclave, it's very, very going, and then at the end, on top of the clave, the 4 soloists of ice start improvising jazz. You see? So it's the marriage of these different genres and the syncretism of cultures. You see, the inspiration and the gestures of the cultures that came so from afar, and what was created in the Americas, that now we call it polyrhythmia, we call it jazz, we call it ragtime, we call it guaguancó, we call it bolero, we call it, you know, all of different genres that now we're so familiar with. So that's the piece, and I hope that you enjoy it tomorrow, and watch the kids, and watch the percussionists, because, I mean, it's really something. All right? Yeah.
Word is, Tania, that you're pretty fierce at rehearsals. Word is you're very fierce at rehearsals. I have something that was sent to me on my phone of you conducting.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, who did that?
I don't know.
Thank you.
Apparently the rehearsals are just amazing.
Yes. I mean, and not only that, the professors that actually are guiding all of the students, they are very overwhelmed because they're seeing what the students have been capable to do in the 2 months, actually, that I have been in residency, you know, New York, LA, New York, yeah.
And Los Angeles is laying the groundwork to having one of the most progressive music programs, public music programs in the country right now. The fundraising for instruments is completely path-breaking right now, and it's gone from having been crossed out as a line item to now being one of the most exciting programs system-wide.
Yes.
So it's a very exciting moment in Los Angeles.
Yes. I agree.
I'd like to say, for those of you who don't know, and those of you who do, to remind you, we have been treated this weekend to this extraordinary group of young women composers, all of them very different. When I first started trying to teach courses on women and music, the people we were able to deal with, because they had recordings, because they had already managed to get up to that level where they were getting commissions, where they were getting recordings. Pauline Oliveros, Meredith Monk, Tania León. These women are the path breakers. They are the ones who were there and who had the strength, the talent, just the brilliance to break through that glass ceiling a generation ago. And what we're seeing this weekend is not just the brilliant new work of Tania León, but what she allowed for this younger generation. This younger generation doesn't ask any longer, can I be a composer if I'm a woman? And all of those kids who are in that orchestra are never going to ask if they can be composers or conductors, because they've had you in front of them. So I want to salute you for a lifetime of extraordinary work that we all are indebted to.
Right here on this stage tomorrow afternoon. And then after that is an event that's so completely shocking and strange and beautiful. And this is a work by a composer named Claude Vivier. And it's called Copernicus. Claude Vivier died in the 80s. And his music is just now being rediscovered in these last few years. And I have wanted to do his opera Copernicus for 10 years. It's always impossible. And I said, okay, Ojai, we're going to do it. Now, of course, it is a very, very simple first tasting. But already the first tasting is a huge thing. Maybe we should just say a word about Claude Vivier.
Sure. Vivier was a foundling. He never knew who his parents were. He was discovered on the streets of Montreal as an infant. He was adopted. That sense of not knowing his family haunted him for his entire life. And after you've heard Copernicus, you might want to go home and listen to this absolutely heartbreaking song he wrote called Lonely Child, which is a fantasy of a mother lulling a child to sleep with fairies looking over the child to take care of it. And this was one of his lifelong fantasies. You will see those kinds of insecurities showing up all the way through Copernicus as well. He wanted to be a priest. He was thrown out of the preparation, very much like Simon was not allowed to be in the resistance. Claude Vivier was not allowed to stay in the preparation for the priesthood, most likely because of his homosexuality, which he never tried to hide from anyone. He moved to Paris, worked in Paris for much of his career. The last piece he was writing was called Do You Believe in the Immortality of the Soul? And the very last part he wrote, he had the words, and then I brought him to my apartment and he pulled a knife and killed me. He then, Vivier, went down into the streets, picked up a male prostitute, brought him back, drew a knife on him, and killed him. Right after he had
That
written...
is, the prostitute killed Claude
Yes.
Vivier.
So he had
With
just
that piece
written...
unfinished on the desk.
It was on the desk. He had just written those words. He had just set that music. It was enacted as the piece was sitting there. He died at age 34, very young, thought he was a failure. His music had not really been received. He had studied with Stockhausen in Germany, had very, very serious training before he decided that there was something lacking in that training he had received, and he wanted to go in a more spiritual direction. And I'd like to read to you just a paragraph from his own introduction to the score of Copernicus. I asked Peter if I could read this because it will sound to you as though Peter wrote it. I mean, this is a piece that was out there waving its arms around, waiting for Peter. And I knew that if he read this, you would think that this was just Peter talking again. But this is Claude Vivier writing around 1979, I believe. I want that art be a sacred act, the revelation of forces, the communication with those forces. The musician should no longer perform music, but organize sessions of discovery, seances that invoke the forces of nature, forces that existed, exist, and will continue to exist, forces that are truth. The true goal of any real revolution is to set a civilization that has detached itself back on the path of those forces. Become a priest. Organize ceremonies dedicated to these forces. Find the soul of humanity and return it to itself. Force the individual to face himself and to face infinity. Before the total mystery that is the universe, contemplate it, ultimately locate oneself within it. Organize revelations in which the performers are the priests and the composer is the medium. Start again at the beginning. Really put the world to rights. Rediscover sensitivity. The world is getting ready for a huge change. Would you like to participate? Now, there are two commercial DVDs of Copernicus, neither of which we like. One of them you can get on DVD from Amazon. People have on clown makeup. They are running around in funny costumes. The other one is on YouTube. You can stream it. And it is just vague about what this piece is. This is a very difficult, very abstract piece with enormous stakes. And so I'm going to turn this back over to Peter, and I want him to talk about what he has found in this piece and what he wants us to get from the production that he's going to show us tomorrow.
Thank you, Susan. I would really emphasize that, as Susan said, because Claude Vivier didn't have any connection to a family, any connection to normal bonds of love or companionship, he had to invent all his life friends. So he, from a young age, spoke in many invented languages. He always made up people who were in the room who came to visit him. He decided that, he was like Jesus Christ, his mother was something special, but he didn't really have parents. And so this world is in these operas. This opera is, in fact, the most beautiful possible music. And it's what you want your grandmother to have. in her ears in her last hours on earth. It's this incredible surrounding somebody with enormous love. And you don't know if they can feel it or hear it, but you're going to really make sure it's there. And as Vivier says, the characters are the god of fire, or the goddess of fire, because fire is our breath. Fire is what allows us to be alive. Fire is that part of us that keeps the heat in us. The god of fire, it lets us breathe, lets us live, lets us have our spark. And the other characters are Mozart, the Queen of the Night, Tristan and Isolde, Copernicus and his mother. It's called Copernicus because it's just about looking beyond. It's about what it means to look beyond, see the worlds that are invisible, and understand that we're in a much larger universe than our daily troubles. It begins with a letter of Lewis Carroll that is so beautiful, saying, just put aside our daily cares and let us, in this world where everything is so ridiculous, let's put that aside and ask ourselves larger questions and move in those directions. This opera is what Vivier did when he left Stockhausen, was go to Bali. And there, the Balinese have the most beautiful cremation ceremonies and understanding of the process of dying. That's one of the things, in our vastly superior Western technology, we are so clueless about the moment of our own death. In Bali, they know 3 days before. Someone now has 3 days to live. And they start playing the correct music 3 days before. So that the person who's leaving the world has this carpet of music for their last 3 days on earth. And then there's 3 days of music after the departure, while the body lies in an open coffin. Music still surrounds the body. And in all-night ceremonies, the spirit of the deceased is brought back to talk to the community. These incredible ceremonies, when you go to them, they're overwhelming because it's this combination of joy, because it's understood that the people leaving aren't helped by our grief. What they actually need is the support of our joy and our love. And then after the departure, so much celebration of the life of the person and holding them gently as they're going through the most painful stage of transition in the 3 days after death. And so there's nothing harsh, there's just gentle, beautiful, thrilling sense of support for the person who's going through this struggle of dying. And a lot of humor. Crazy topeng dancers step forward like at 3 a.m. when the whole village is there and begin channeling the voice of the departed who speaks through them and says things that couldn't be said while that person was alive. And that nobody can be released until these things are acknowledged by everyone. And so this whole process, actually across 3 days, not only helps the deceased towards their next place, but also the community can heal and say difficult things to each other in an atmosphere that is supportive and hilarious. So Vivier was completely intoxicated by all of that, and he decided to create his own ceremony with 7 singers and 7 instruments, and speaking nonsense or higher knowledge languages, and his own beautiful, strange poetry, and histories of philosophers and astronomers, and everything, and Tristan and Isolde, and everything he wanted to put in there. The result is music that is so rich and beautifully textured. The instruments are solo violin, oboe, 3 clarinets, trombone, and trumpet. The trumpet will be at the back of the house here, and is the trumpet that's calling you to the next world. The trombone is here speaking from this world, and they're in dialogue through the whole piece. And then you have the clarinets giving you the sound of agony, the fire just pouring out, pouring out, pouring out. It's the piece, it's amazing that this will be the US premiere of this piece. It's such a great, great, great piece. And I do intend to work on it for many, many years. This is our first step, but I knew if we had Ice and Roomful of Teeth in the same festival, we should give them something huge to embark on together. This thing is so hard, and I have to say the instrumentalists have been astounding because the instruments are characters, and the vocalists are just so virtuosic and beautiful. You kind of can't believe it. I won't exactly call this a staging, it's just a way of hearing it. And of course, our rehearsals have been so beautiful here because something Vivier, I'm sure, would give him pleasure, is the wind in the trees, the swallows, the total life-affirming presence of Ojai is so gorgeous. So I would just say tomorrow afternoon we have, I'm really tired of asking irritating old white classical music avatars what the future of classical music is. We just want to say, okay, the future of classical music will be all these kids on the stage. And the future is also the undiscovered past, which is prophetic, always was prophetic, is always ahead of us, and is always reminding us of where we haven't been yet. Then we will all go to Santa Paula for this giant street party, and we will have Los Jornaleros del Norte. We will also have Cambalache, and and we will have more of Dina El Wadidi. Her band will be back in the streets of Santa Paula, absolutely. That will be really hot. And Cambalache, this jarocho band, I should mention, is really also an incredible art project between Veracruz, Mexico, and Los Angeles, and incredible levels of community organizing, incredible levels of what's called El Fandango, right? And the Fandango is this ongoing community development project through music. And Cambalache represents really one of the most sophisticated and completely artistically rich versions of that. So the streets of Santa Paula tomorrow will be thrilling, particularly after 5 o'clock. And we want to, of course, thank the Chamber of Commerce of Santa Paula for making this incredible experience possible. They have welcomed us with open arms and said the Ojai Festival, of course, has to come to Santa Paula. They have been so generous and warm, and I'm just looking forward to it as a total high. So that's what's on tomorrow, everyone. Now, just to mention, in a word, 2 things about tonight. We have, immediately after we finished here, Aruna Sairam and her ensemble will be with us, and this will be a pure high. And we've talked about her, so I think everyone's ready, and I have to say the place is sold out tonight, so word did get around. That's fantastic. Then after that, our late night show is the Josephine Baker evening. And I would just like to mention this is a very, very special undertaking. And again, we have to thank Claire Chase and ICE for making this possible. Julia Bullock, the incredible Julia Bullock, when she graduated from Juilliard, her coming out recital in New York was a group of Spanish medieval songs, a whole set of Messiaen, intermission, Josephine Baker, followed by Billy Strayhorn. And that was her recital. Now, what a joy to live in these times when that's a classical recital. And that's Julia. So we asked her if she wanted to develop her Josephine Baker part of her program. Taishan Sori, the astonishing instrumentalist and composer, has orchestrated but then also completely rewritten and written new music for 7 Josephine Baker songs. And they're music hall songs written by professional French, the Lido, craftsmen of show business. But of course, one of the sad things about Josephine Baker leaving the casts of Shuffled Along in 1925 and going to Paris is that it meant for the rest of her life she never really ever sang black music. She sang music written by professional Parisian show business songwriters. Taishan Sori has fixed that. Tonight, Josephine will sing black music. And a song like Si j'étais blanche, If I Were White, which of course is just a music hall frippery, becomes a 16-minute meditation that is overwhelming. In addition, we invited Claudia Rankine, the poet who's now so celebrated all across America, to write a series of poems that go into Josephine Baker, get beyond the makeup, beyond the costumes. Claudia has been so busy this year, she has just not had a moment to write. And so I texted her and said, that's fine. We can do another project another year. 3 weeks ago, the first texts started arriving. And Claudia has looked very deeply into Josephine. So tonight, Julia Bullock will read Claudia Rankine's poems between each of the songs as reimagined by Taishan Sori. So tonight we have a very, very special world premiere as our 10:30 late show. So please enjoy. This will be our last conversation. Can I just say thank you all so much for coming this summer. It's wonderful having everyone here and looking forward to these last 36 hours. Thank you, Ojai. Thank you to the staff. Thank you to the beautiful volunteers. Thank you to the management. And thank you to this astonishing, astonishing public. Thank you so much.